Hey, this is the Fighter. I'm here at Bellator 2 in Uncasville, Connecticut right now. I'm joined now by one of the founders of the company, Bjorn Rebney. Bjorn, thank you for being here.
Hey, my pleasure.
Thanks. So can you tell us, please, what is your background in mixed martial arts?
My background was really from the fighting sport, starting in the early 90s, working with Oscar De La Hoya, and then in turn forming a boxing promotion company and partnering with Sugar Ray Leonard, promoting and producing a very successful program on ESPN2 for 4 straight years, which was the highest rated program on the network, called Sugar Ray Leonard Presents Friday Night Fights. I was always a mixed martial arts fan, and my business was boxing. I would pay to go see UFC events. I would watch you. I would buy the pay-per-views. I would bring the old VHS tapes in from Pride from Japan. I would do all of those things, and that's what I enjoyed to do. And my business was a business of boxing, and I got very fortunate when my boxing company ended. I got the chance to put some time and energy and money into trying to make what I enjoyed into a career, and here we are.
So what was the moment that first got you hooked into mixed martial arts?
You know, I had the pleasure of spending some time with Hickson Gracie many years ago in Southern California, many years ago. And I think that the thing that first got me hooked was just the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in terms of its ability to have really kind of a game of chess going on the ground, and that a little man could beat a big man, and that there was a monsterful technical aspect to the game that you don't typically see in boxing. And then as the maturation of MMA happened, and as it became less and less about tough guys, it became more and more about a really true, well-rounded mixed martial artist who could grapple and could strike and was a relatively good judo player and could fight on the ground and could, all of the different aspects coming together. It's just, there's always a technical evolution, and there's always a strength and speed evolution. And I think when you look at sports, you look at football, what do we love? We love the big hit. In basketball, what do we love? We love the slam dunk. In baseball, we love a home run. Mixed martial arts gives you all of that speed and power and athleticism and guts all in one well-rounded kind of soup. And I mean, it's just, you know, it's the same reason that 18 to 34-year-old males go bananas over this game, and why the ratings are so high, because it is the consummate, most basic sport, and yet it is constantly evolving from a technological perspective. I just think it's the greatest sport in the world.
Why has ESPN decided to jump on MMA bandwagon right now?
We started, obviously, I had a great 4-year run with ESPN in my boxing programming, and my partner, Brad Epstein, spent almost a decade with the Disney family as a producer, producing movies like Ladder 49, Invincible, About a Boy, Dan in Real Life, and a series of others. And I felt, and he felt, that ESPN was going to be a magical home for MMA. If you could eventually get ESPN to jump on board and to program mixed martial arts, it would be a spectacular home. Demographically, it would be the right kind of home. Their reach was enormous. It was the kind of untapped market of MMA. And so we kept pushing and kept presenting and kept talking and presenting and talking, and finally we got the yes.
Now in this current environment, there's a lot of companies that have been coming and going lately. Do you think now is a good time to start a company?
I think any time when you've got a ridiculously exciting sport that a young male demographic follows in a heartfelt way, if you have the right business model, then it's the right time to start. Obviously, we're in a down economic climate. Sponsorship is not at an all-time high. People aren't willing to buy tickets the way they were maybe a year or two ago. But if you put out a good product and it's compelling and it tracks and there's a reason to watch as opposed to just kind of your typical reality programming, I think you've got a good opportunity. If the model's strong, if you're financially conservative, if you really pay attention to the numbers, and if it's well thought out and structured, my hope would be that that's where we are.
Now, with that said, what's going to help separate Bellator from other companies to survive?
I think my feeling and my desire from the very moment I got into the boxing business in the early 1990s was there needed to be objectivity. You needed to be able to, as a fan, I was always confused, and then as a promoter, it always threw me for a loop that guys would end up fighting for a world title, but there was no objectivity to how they earned it. A guy in a shiny suit sitting behind a desk, your matchmaker would make a decision, well, this guy is going to fight for the world title. And it was never based on what football or basketball or baseball or hockey or soccer or tennis or golf or every other sport we like is based on, which is the best playing the best or fighting the best, ultimately qualifying for a playoff. You win in the playoffs, you go to a final, you win in the final, you're the champion. You get the check or the prize or the cup. The fighting sports haven't worked like that. And I think that's one of the reasons boxing has become literally fallen off the landscape of consciousness of American consumers. So what our point of difference is objectivity. Fighters control their own destiny. Tournament-based format. Fighters will determine if they become champions at Bellator Fighting Championships. Not our matchmaker, and not me, and not my partner. It's to get the best fighters we can get in a group of 8 at feather, light, welter, and middle, and next season at light heavy and heavy and potentially bantam, and let them fight it out so that the best prevails based on their elbows, their hands, their knees, their feet, their grappling ability, their wrestling, their BJJ. They should decide it. In my mind, not everybody agrees, but the way we see it, I think the fighter should ultimately make that determination. So that's what we've given them an opportunity to do. And no reality show syndrome to it. Real fights, guys in their own backyard, telling the stories of who they are and where they're from based on them being in their own communities, training with their own trainers, being in their own gym, working with their own sparring partners and their training partners. I'm an old school sports guy. That's what I want to see.
Now, being on ESPN Deportes, do you have to follow any certain guidelines to be on their show?
No. I mean, I think that the UFC has done a masterful job. They have the greatest product out there in the marketplace right now. And that's what fans like myself have grown up watching and have fallen in love with the game watching. So if the rules that they employ are the rules that everybody likes, why would you change them? That always sets up. I would watch other leagues that have come and gone over the last 3-4 years, and I would look at them and they would stand up with great pride and say, we're changing this or we're changing that. If something's working remarkably well, it surprises me and shocks me that somebody would want to change it. You may change the essence of how you conduct your tournaments. You may change it to be an objective format. You may change it to be tournament-based. But the rules themselves are what fans like me like to watch. So why change that?
Now, I had to be a little pain in the ass now, really a little bit here. There's been some talk about the contracts that are in Bellator, exclusivity and likeness rights. Can you explain what are the contracts? Bellator, can fighters fight elsewhere or compete elsewhere in grappling competitions? And what about the rights to their face and likeness?
Sure. Fighters can fight in grappling competitions, BJJ competitions, sambo competitions. They can't fight for another mixed martial arts organization. So just like your contract that you'd enter into with the UFC or the WEC or any of the other organizations that exist, fighters are exclusive to Bellator Fighting Championships. And they'll fight for us for the term of their agreement. And when they're done with their agreement with us, they can go on and fight anywhere they like to.
Now, is there a champions clause in the contract for these fighters?
Yes, absolutely. Same kind of champions clause you find in at least the leading organizations clauses, and that is a certain number of fights. The fighter wins our championship. There's an extension that we have of 3 fights. So if a guy becomes champion and wins $175,000 before July 4th in a 3-month period, we have the right to extend. That fighter continues to make great money with us, and our agreement is 3 fights longer than it otherwise would have been.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about the tournaments going on tonight and also the previous show.
Sure.
So I don't know if you're say any names, but who are your picks to win the tournaments?
There are a lot of talented fighters in our tournament. I mean, for example, last week, if you'd asked me early on, I would have said that Nick Gonzalez was a dark horse at 45. And then Nick is out of the tournament in the first round. I think there are some very talented fighters at 55. There are a lot of guys on the cusp at 70. Tough to say. You'd have to pick out some obvious guys and say, well, you'd be hard-pressed to bet against Eddie Alvarez. You'd be hard-pressed to bet against Jorge Masvidal. And even at 55, fighting Thomas Schulte. You talk about a guy who has fought at a very high level for a very long time and not been given an opportunity to conceptually put himself to the test at the very highest level on the ground, a monster. So at 55, interesting. 70, tough to say. Hector Lombard at 85 would have to be somebody you'd look at. Daniel Tavera coming out of Spain, fought in the U.S. once, very heavy-handed. It's interesting. It's a tournament. It's 3 months. We'll see. I just love the tournament aspect of it, so we'll see. That's what's cool about it. It's
good to see it brought back.
Yeah, they win, they go on. They win and they move forward, and it's all in their hands, which I think is cool. I think that ultimately that's the way it should work.
Now, being that your target audience is mainly going to be a Latin American community, are there any plans to go to Mexico or any other Latin American countries in the future?
Not as of yet, but we have been approached by groups based in Mexico, the venue groups out of Mexico, as well as television groups about bringing some of our programming there. We're already set for this season, but the next season coming up this fall, that could very well happen.
And we're going to wrap it right now because the sound here is getting a little rough. So, one last question is, what can we expect of Bellator Season 2?
You can expect at least 2 tournaments to develop #1 challengers for the winners of 2 of the weight classes here, and in all likelihood a heavyweight tournament, and then either a bantam and light heavy tournament.
This This video is brought to you by Boston Brawler. Check out their gear and apparel at bostonbrawler.com.